George Floyd, how to use NLP to dissolve anger. Now, I have been a victim of assault and battery in a city in Illinois, USA when I was 23. 7 staples in my scalp and contusions and a hematoma on my head and face. When I was being assaulted, I couldn't get my attacker to stop. I tried screaming. I had to think quickly. Eventually, I screamed the exact same words that George Floyd screams. I screamed, "I cannot breathe." You scream, "I cannot breathe," as a last resort, as an act of sheer and utter desperation. Now, unlike Floyd, my attacker stopped. He ceased bashing me in the head. He became concerned that he was killing me when I screamed that. The 3 police officers that held Floyd down, that inadvertently killed Floyd, and the 4th that kept watch, were corrupt. They were toxic people. But that doesn't mean that all police officers are bad. Bloody hell! This leads us to dissolving fear and anger with NLP. Now, I'll get to NLP shortly. Reacting to violence with more violence, coupling and accumulating violence, is being a dunderhead. Protests produce unnecessary violence. When people protest violently, more innocent people get injured. There was a harmless journalist who went blind in her eye as a result of protesting for George Floyd. Naturally, the solution is not to forget about the atrocity. That would be truly disastrous. Forgetting about atrocities like the Holocaust, George Floyd, World War II, and more is one of the worst things we can do as a species. And yes, World War II was an atrocity. Over 70 million humans died, making it the deadliest military conflict in history. It doesn't matter the intention when that many of our own species die. It's an unforgettably nauseating abomination, just like the death of George Floyd. But producing more violence is worse than defenestrating the existence of the deplorable incident in the first place. Now, there's a NLP technique that I developed called Pivot, where you address the positives of the problem, the ideal prevention, the valiant willing steps, the obvious unwilling steps, and finally, the technical procedure. So the positives of the current problem. We're progressing more towards equality. The solidarity reveals how strongly we seek equality. The ideal prevention. What is preventing the ideal from occurring? Well, the ideal is no corrupt people exist and we all treat each other respectfully. And what is preventing that from occurring? Well, that's for you to put in the comments. What is your opinion? Right. And the valiant willing steps. Listen to the message of the need for equality. Obvious unwilling steps. Continued violence. No one needs more violence. We've had enough violence. And look how atrocious this is. We've been cooped up, isolated, and our first act of congregation is not one of joy and celebration. It's one of violence. That's revolting. Technical procedure, alright. So what is the solution? Embrace anger with tenderness. Alright, so Thich Nhat Hanh is a hero of mine. He's a very serious man. I'll get to Thich Nhat Hanh shortly. First, we must discuss anger. Anger is an emotion you experience because someone has violated something you value. Americans feel something very essential to their existence has been violated. The best way to counteract this rage is with compassion. But protesting police brutality, people who literally risk their lives to keep and maintain peace, is like getting mad at the ocean when a sail on your ship gets smashed by a wave. In the waves of life, there are storms. The storms of protests, violent protests, is indeed a racism-fueled tempest in the ocean of America, but we will mature as a result of them. So compassion. This is what Thich Nhat Hanh says. He's a Buddhist monk, a very serious man. He's a hero of mine. He says, when you do not have the capacity to listen with compassion, you cannot just pretend you are listening. Now, protesters are not listening with compassion. Instead, they are abreacting out of rage. When you abreact, you undergo an emotional, unconscious reaction that emotionally teleports you back to a painful situation already experienced. That's what many Americans are doing. They are not listening. They are abreacting and producing more violence. This is destructive. So Thich Nhat Hanh encourages you to embrace your anger with a lot of tenderness. Your anger is not your enemy. Your anger is your baby. It's like your stomach or your lungs. Every time you have some trouble in your lungs or your stomach, you don't think of throwing them away. The same is true of your anger. You accept your anger because you know you can take care of it. You transform it into positive energy. So I encourage Americans to transform their anger into positive energy. Reflect on how far we've come from having indentured servants and slaves in colonial America to gauge where we are now. Yes, George Floyd is a monumental role in the ship towards equality. But in the evolution of the human spirit, African Americans have come a long way. But so have women, so have Latinos and Asians and Caucasians. Are we actually looking at people based on their skin pigment and making judgments about their character? Are we idiotic buffoons? No. We have the ability to behave better, more evolved than this. But racism pathetically still exists. In February, Jonathan Mock, an Asian in the UK, was violently punched and kicked by a group of 4 men saying, "We don't want your coronavirus in our country." Now that was racism. Police officers brutalizing George Floyd was also racism. Now the book Heart of Darkness is clearly one of the books first to demoralize the toxic belief of racism. I have read Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, who spoke 3 languages, English, French, and his native tongue Polish. I did a term paper on it in school. It's a classic, but it's a dark and dreary book. It depicts slaves as vermin. Conrad depicts this dismal scenery in the jungle of the Congo through the lens of the protagonist Marlowe, who describes imperialism and slavery he witnesses as rapacious and pitiless folly. That's what both the death of George Floyd and the violent protests are. Rapacious and pitiless folly. So conclusively, the hardship of George Floyd was the result of the corruption of unnecessary violence. However, the violent protests are beyond stupid. Violent protests to counteract violence lacks even the most rudimentary common sense. Even George's younger brother, Terence, condemned the violence, saying his brother would have stood for peace. So the protests aren't even doing what Floyd wanted. Corrupt people do exist, but there are many quality police officers. Alright, so, with that note, do you think unity as a species is more important than suffocating our voice? Post in the comments, use your voice, share your opinion on the George Floyd matter. Thanks for watching. This has been John Kooz. To learn more about me, visit johnKooz.com and click on the link for coaching if you feel that neurolinguistic programming and the ability to dissolve toxic emotions will upgrade your life.